with you on a Friday, getting ready to start the weekend. And I have a great guest in the studio now. He is running for Tipton County Executive. That is Billy Daugherty. And I've known Billy for a long time. We've never hung out really, but we knew each other professionally because we were both young public servants at the same time, and we both got promoted to positions at a young age, and so we kind of a couple of times commiserated over the having to deal with some of the things that come your way when you look like you're too young to be doing your job. But tell everybody a little bit about your background.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me this morning. Excited to be here and to talk to the citizens of Tipton County and the listeners at 93.5. Of course, my name is Billy Daugherty. I'm lifelong Tipton County and been serving this county for 28 years now. It seemed like it was yesterday I started, but it's been 28 years. Just spent, of course, 22 of those years I spent at the sheriff's office. I retired as chief in 2021, stayed on as reserve. I got 28 years total with my reserve time. And then the past 5 years as CFO at Tipton County Schools. Of course, live in Brighton area. My wife is an educator, she's been teaching almost 30 years too in the system. And my daughter's a teacher. My mother lives here. My family's here. So Tipton County is my home, and this is where I've served for a long time. And I'm excited about this next season of service I feel like the Lord's called me to.
And so talk a little bit about what made you want to run for county executive. We were talking off the air, but we're coming out of a long time under one county executive, Jeff Huffman, who has done a fantastic job. I mean, obviously you wouldn't keep the job that long if you hadn't done a good job. And a lot of the ways that he does things, now I won't get too into the weeds, but when I worked in government work, I was really impressed with a lot of the ways and philosophies he had about how to run a government physically with the money and stuff. So, but basically the county's had this one guy at the helm for this long. And so I guess you found out before you decided to run that he was not running, or were you going to run anyway?
Well, I do want to, give a shout out that he has had a long career in service, and he's built a great foundation. He and I share some of the fiscally conservative policies together, and the debt-free ideals and that kinds of thing. But I'm excited to run. Maybe a year ago, I've had people approaching me over the years saying, "Hey, I think you should run for mayor. I think you should run for mayor." But at the time, to be quite frank, I had my sights set on sheriff. I always thought I would, run for sheriff at some point. But after a couple of decades in that career, it can change your mind. And but anyway, so I decided to run for mayor. And of course, when I made the decision, my wife and I prayed through it. I went and met with Jeff one-on-one out of respect, and just told Jeff I felt like I was going to run, and he thought he wasn't going to run after he and I talked, and I waited for him to make his decision and then made my announcement.
Yeah. And so I didn't mean to put you on the spot there with that, but just, this is the guy that we've known forever. And I noticed that you're saying mayor, and that's sort of, I think, this curiosity I've always had that I've never really known the answer to. Is why do we call it county executive when most other counties at least call it county mayor? I'm thinking probably just because that's what the charter says, but is it a different type of government structure with an executive versus a mayor, or is it just a title?
It's a title. It's the same thing. So kind of how, if you remember way back in the day, you were talking about the tenure of my predecessor. Well, in our conversations, he says there's been 3 mayors in 100 years in Tipton County. I mean, because before him was what I know is Judge Vaughn. So the county mayor used to be called county judge. Okay. And that was Mr. Henry Vaughn. And of course, then it was later changed to county executive. And then there was a change to county mayor, but the state legislature gave counties an opportunity to pass a resolution to keep the title of county executive. Tipton County was one of those that did that. I believe that was 2007, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. And then they changed the law that says you can't go back to county executive. So if you're county executive now and you change it to mayor, you can never go back to county executive. So the terms are interchangeable. County executive, county mayor is the same thing. And it's basically, the CEO of the county, the chief financial officer of the county, chief administrative officer of the county. And so oftentimes you'll hear the term county executive and mayor used interchangeably.
Okay, I got you. And so I didn't know, because I know that certain ways with the state, in my experience, like with the city, you can be set up as with a mayor charter, or you can be set up with a city manager charter, in which you would still maybe have a mayor, but it's the powers and all of that is different. So I didn't know if that was the way it was with the county. Just tell me a little bit about what your visions is for where Tipton County is going, and things you would like to accomplish as the Tipton County Executive.
So I think one of the things that I will need to be most focused on is growth. I think my administration is probably going to be more about managing growth, whereas previously it was more about steady management. Now, and that's not to say that there hasn't been a buildup, because it has been in preparation for a lot of this growth. But growth is coming. It's not, it's not if we're going to grow, it's how we're going to grow. And so I love the fingerprint Tipton County has. I enjoy being out in the rural area away from the city, but also like the Chick-fil-A. And so everybody wants some growth, but I think there needs to be a plan, and we need to be ahead of that plan. I think we all learned a lesson from the state on the mega site when they were marketing the mega site and had developed the mega site, and it lacked one of the most key components, which was wastewater. And so we don't need to be in a situation where we have people coming in ready to grow and we don't have the infrastructure to meet that need, but also that burden doesn't need to be passed necessarily to those that are living here. It needs to be those that are coming as well.
Yeah. And also, on that note, like if you plan these things, and create the infrastructure and make sure the infrastructure is not only there, but in the right places, then you avoid situations where you get growth in areas that aren't really prime candidates for that, and where you get into a residential area that becomes half commercial or something like that. But if you've got all your wastewater infrastructure for commercial, or your electrical infrastructure for commercial in one area, that's where they'll congregate to. So you can kind of control the aesthetic, I guess, of the city by being prepared for that.
Yeah. So one of the things I think we need to try to avoid, if we can, is the sparse growth. And that's what you're talking about, that quilted patchwork of, walk in the middle of nowhere and all of a sudden come up on something. And it makes sense. Any model that I've looked at, it looks most fiscally responsible to build around the city centers because the infrastructure already exists. And so if you build it, it's kind of like, if I used this analogy before, if you bought 10 acres of land and you built a house on the front acre, you wouldn't build the bathroom on the back side, because then, it would obviously be more money to run the utilities and everything out there. It's the same thing with county growth. You build it up close to where the development already is, and then let it go out from there. And then we maintain, we need our farmland.
Yeah.
And Tipton County has lost 7,500 acres of farmland to different rezoning in the last 10 years. A lot of people don't realize that. That's a lot of land.
It is. And the other thing that happens is you end up with areas that were developed that get abandoned for newer areas. And then you still got these old areas, and they become blighted, and they're not suitable for residential. They're suitable for commercial, but all of the commercial has moved away from that area. And so by doing what you're talking about, which is, upgrading the areas that are already developed, it's certainly keeps your town fresh and not from, looking like the set of The Walking Dead or something,
That's right. Well, anybody that's driven through certain parts of the county knows that there's some areas that need attention. And I look forward to working with the city mayors. We've got a lot of good city mayors that have great visions. And I know there's a lot of elections going on, and that landscape may change as well, but there's no picture of development or growth until we address some of those issues. That is part of the equation of addressing that growth. And, we want our community to be something we can be proud of when someone drives through here. We have a beautiful historic square, a lot of, small businesses there. I'm a proponent of supporting small business, and to draw people into that culture that we all come to love about Tipton County, there has to be a balance.
Yeah, absolutely. Gonna have to take a break here. We're at the bottom of the hour. I'm gonna give you guys some Riley Green right now. Same thing, right? Billy, I appreciate you joining me this morning, man. And I'm glad you're able to give your time in more than one segment, because there's so much to talk about coming up. One of the things that I wanted to ask you is running unopposed, I think, presents its own challenges. In some ways, it's easier because you know that you're unopposed, so you can prepare to take the job earlier than if you are just trying to campaign and get the job. But also, there's maybe a little less knowledge and a little less people asking what you're going to do out there because they think, well, you're the only guy. So there's people are maybe a little less interested in what your plans are and things in general. And so I think that has its own unique challenges as well to because you still want to have the public behind you in an election, even if you're unopposed. You still want to, you don't want to get votes because you're the only name on the ballot. You want to get votes because people want you to be Tipton County Executive.
That's right. Well, I learned a long time ago. I heard one of my mentors say, he said, there's only two ways to run a campaign: unopposed and scared. And so I appreciate the fact that I'm unopposed, and it does present its own set of unique challenges, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to run unopposed. Clearly. Now I've still been out there. I've had, and this is the balance that I try to keep, because I have people saying, why are you doing these things? You're unopposed. You shouldn't do that. Then I hear other people saying, we need to see you out here. You know, some people don't know you. And I've had the benefit of serving every corner of this county for the last almost 30 years. And so I know a lot of the people already. But listen, I've been, when I left the sheriff's office, retired June of 21 and been to the school district, I have not been out as much with my current job as I was prior. And so, listen, I've learned on the campaign trails a lot of new people in Tipton County. I'm meeting a lot of new folks. And so, yeah, it does that. So that's the dynamic I have. It's like, how many events do you have? How much do you do when you're unopposed? But I think it's still important to be available to the people regardless. And so I'm going to make myself available to the people. And I think I've shown that through this campaign so far. And the other thing, like you said earlier, and you mentioned it, being unopposed has given me the opportunity to run parallel to my campaign is my plan, or my plans to what I would like to do. And so I've been meeting every couple of weeks with Mayor Huffman, preparing for the transition, because I'm not waiting until September 1st to start learning. I'm going to work September 1st. And so I've been meeting with him every couple of weeks, staying briefed on what's going on, catching up on the issues. Been meeting with our economic development director, Mark Herbison, regularly about every couple of weeks, because that's going to be a key component to my administration, is the growth, and he's driving that through what he does. He does a great job, but he's also retiring. There's a lot of change in county government this year. There's a lot of turnover of senior officials who've been here more than 30 years that are retiring. I know 4 offices, and and other people shifting around. Got a superintendent that's been here a long time that's retiring, and
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of changes in Tiffany. It's going to look different after September 1st.
He's going to be on this show at some point. He doesn't know it yet,
Yeah.
but he's going to be on here. But the one thing that you had said to me that stuck out was when people are looking for somewhere to move, they look for safety and schools. And so those are the two. You don't want to say one thing has priority over the other, because every component of government is important. But those two things, making sure those two things are buttoned up, is what makes a place desirable, which brings in a tax base, which brings in sales tax revenue, which helps give us all the services we need. And so what are your plans with public safety and schools, if you don't mind?
So, I have a great relationship with both, and that is true. When someone moves to a community, is it safe, and how are the schools? We have a great sheriff's office. My heart is there because I spent a lot of my adult life there, and but it goes beyond just the sheriff's office. You've been in the fire service before. I mean, the fire, EMS, the police, and Lord knows the dispatchers who work behind the scenes so much. That really kind of holds everything together for all of us, right? So, public safety will always have my support, because I just know how important it is. The schools are a great component. Let me say this before I move into that. The first place that people feel county government is when they drive down the road in the morning. That's where people notice if government's working well. So if you hadn't complained about the roads, things are working well. But what they don't feel is that blanket of protection oftentimes that law enforcement brings, until something's wrong. And so
Right.
the way law enforcement is working well is when you don't even know that they're there, right? Things are going well because they're suppressing criminal activity and keeping things safe. We have a wonderful school system, 14th largest in the state, well run, got a great board of education, great leadership there with Dr. Combs. And of course, Dr. Bird's coming in. She's phenomenal. I've worked around her for the last 5 years as well. And way beyond that, even at the sheriff's office, we got great teachers. I'm partial to a couple of them because, one of them's my wife. But the schools do well. If you look at the scores, there's always room for improvement, right? But if you compare us to other schools in the areas, if you can, there's no economic plan. If you listen to Mark Herberson, the economic development director, talk, the school sells Tipton County because we have a great school system. We have great faculty members. We have great opportunities. And Tipton County, under my watch, I'd like to keep it, from really cradle to career, because we have great schools, pre-K programs that get kids started, and all the way through the dual enrollment CTE pathways, the post-secondary success. It doesn't always look like a college degree for everybody. There's a lot of opportunities to make good money in the trades, which I think has been ignored for a long time. When you and I were kids, I think they were ignored more so than they should have been. And but that's not the case now. And through the school's leadership and the Board of Education, Dr. Combs, a lot of those programs have been put into place. And we have kids graduating now with a 2-year. When they graduate high school, they're graduating with a 2-year degree in college. And so what that does, why that's important, is that is the pipeline that feeds workforce development. And so, you're producing well-educated, well-rounded children that are going out into the workforce, folks that we're looking for on, industry and everywhere else. And so I think those are key core components that have to be managed. I'm going to always support the schools. Public education is a constitutional right. I was brought up through public education. Some of the most influential people in my life were my elementary school, my high school, elementary school teachers. I'll have to give a shout out to one of my most mentors, influential people, Mr. Gordon Stone. He was, I'll have this wall of gratitude. There's so many people that helped me get where I am. I'm standing on the shoulders of a bunch of folks, and he was one of them in his public education. And I go down the list of teachers that made a difference in my life. Miss Joanna Wells. If it hadn't been Miss Joanna Wells, I wouldn't have gone to college. She was my high school counselor, and she found a way to get me into college. And so there's so many people. Public education is so important. It can't be overlooked. And I look forward to supporting them. I have a great relationship already with the board and the superintendent because I work there now. I have a great relationship with Sheriff Beasley. He and I spent many a night in a patrol car together over the last few decades. And so I've worked well with them and I continue to do that. And like I said, I've stayed on as a reserve, so I go back and teach their new hire classes. Even now, I taught one a couple of weeks ago. So I stay in touch with the newer folks because, there's been a lot of change. Us older guys are getting out and the newer guys are coming in, gals. And so, those two things, public safety and education, you can't set up a successful county government without focusing on those two things.
Now, I'm going to take another quick break here. And then when we come back, I want to touch on the fire department, but I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I do want to keep you for one more segment. Because I want to touch on the fire department and I want to touch on the dichotomy that the county has experienced over the last, 30 years or so of north and south. And so we'll get to that on the other side of the break. I really appreciate it. And
glad to be here.
I'm having a good time talking to you about the future plans and stuff for the county. And of course, it's always something that's interested me, but I think a lot of people are interested in just what the plans are, whether or not you think anything is going wrong in the county. And I don't hear a lot of rumblings about that, like you do in a lot of places. There's not a lot of highly political debates going on in the county, but you'd want to know that if you think you're on a good track, that's going to be maintained as well, and that there is a plan for the future. And so I appreciate you talking about that and talking about keeping the infrastructure up and all those different plans. The thing I want to touch on before you go, though, one is the fire department. So we've seen Tipton County in the last handful of years hire a fire chief and then hire actual full-time firemen as an auxiliary to the existing volunteer fire departments, just as so they can guarantee a presence. And then we've seen them now. They're in a station in Quito. They've taken over what used to be the Charleston Volunteer Fire Department. Now that's a Tipton County Fire Station led by John Piercy, who is he was my best friend for a long time in the fire service. He really he was newer in it, but he sort of mentored me when I came into it, and I think he does a good job with the Tipton County Fire Department and growing it. So I just want to know, because I know they're not where they want to be. No department is. Let me make that clear. No department. Every department wants more money, wants more people, wants more whatever. But the fire department doesn't quite have the presence that they want to have 24/7. And so, what are some of the future plans that you see coming up for the fire department?
Yeah. Shout out to John Piercy. I've worked with John for many years, way before there was ever a Tipton County Fire Department. We worked together, met many calls together back when he was at 3 Star, and got to be close as we all tend to do at times. And John has been able, Chief Piercy, he's been able to overcome a lot of obstacles in putting this together. And so the fire service in Tipton County is a lot better now than it ever has been. And of course, like you said, there's been this acquisition of the Charleston Fire Department, and so I see the fire service growing. As the county grows, there's going to be a demand for services. And, oftentimes our cities, Covington, Mumford, Atoka, Brighton, that they extend out, or they're answering calls out in the county. And so at some point we've got to balance that too, right? Sure, a mile outside the city may not be that bad, but when you're running trucks the way out of the city, then you're leaving exposed in the cities. And so we have to evaluate that. But I think from what I've seen, Chief Piercy is the man for the job. He's been doing a good job. He's reporting activity to the county commission on a regular basis. I see his reports in the minutes. And so I feel like he's taking it in the right direction. Now, a lot of part-time fire that are helping to cover that. But, we talked about this before. Makes a lot of difference when a call is being answered from the station, as opposed to when back in the day, you remember people had to race from their house to the station to get in the truck and then race out. And so response times were terrible.
I was one of those.
Yeah.
And most of the time, what ends up happening with the house on fire, for example, is we used to call it surround and drown, because you can't go in. It's so far gone, you can't go in. And so just being there quicker makes a huge difference in loss of property and potentially loss of life.
That's right. And I think John has done a great job. I hear great things from them, and of course look forward to working with Chief Piercy in this new role as well, in the men and women of the Tipton County Fire Department. I think it's an asset to the county, and quite frankly, I think the citizens deserve good coverage, good protection, and got to pay for it. We got to get there to where we can sustain it. But yeah, I look forward to working with you.
I wanted also to touch on something that has been going on in the county for as long as I can remember, as long as I've been actively enough involved to remember, which is there's this idea of Covington and the rest of Tipton County is really what it is. It's north and south, but it's really Covington and then the rest of Tipton County, the other cities. And so it's always like, we have two chambers of commerce, one for the South and one for the Covington area. And, we used to compete for resources, and everything seemed to, it seemed to me that back in the day that the biggest complaint was from, say, Munford and Atoka. And it was that a lot of resources were spent in the Covington area because it was the county seat. Now though, you see the huge growth of Munford and Atoka, and it seems that has shifted. I don't know in terms of county resources, but just in terms of availability of resources in general, because more tax revenue comes in on the south end of the county than the north end of the county. How are you going to address sort of Tipton County as a whole, as one whole county? Because I know that you don't have you have some influence, but you're not running this individual cities. They run themselves. And so they are able to make a lot of their own decisions in what they do. But you do still have to kind of pull everybody together as one county, especially when the county is who does the schools, and the county provides law enforcement to the entire county, city or county. So what is a way that you kind of bring it all together and have it viewed as one and not as, two separate counties, basically?
Well, here's the way I feel about that. If one part of the county doesn't succeed, none of the county succeeds. We all have to be thriving together. Now, the county is like a family. Everybody has their own personality, their own identity, and they do things differently, and that's okay. But at the end of the day, we're still a family, and we gotta, operate cohesively and together and for what's best. And I want to see every municipality be successful, because if they're successful, Tipton County's successful, and vice versa. If the county's successful, the cities are. And that's why I've looked forward. I've already met with all the city mayors, and been meeting with a number of officials, discussing things, getting in preparation for coming into office. And I haven't met with a single person that doesn't have the interest of the citizens in their, at the forefront of their agendas. And now, obviously, if you're a mayor in one city, you're going to represent its interest first. But doing that doesn't mean you have to shun everybody else either, because
Right.
I keep going back to the Chick-fil-A because that's kind of the thing this day. But everybody in the community is benefiting from the Chick-fil-A in Mumford. People benefit from the theater in Atoka. I mean,
Right.
there's so many things that we
Absolutely.
got,
Yeah.
but we cannot ignore Covington is the county seat of the county, and so yes, it plays an integral role in the county government structure overall because that's where the services are based. But I mean, I love all our neighbors. I policed every community in this county, and I love them all. And I think they're all trying to set themselves up. I don't think there's any one person that says, I don't want to succeed or grow or improve.
Let me play this real quick since we're at the top of the hour.
From Covington to Somerville, it's US 51 Country 93.5 FM. WKBQ, Covington.
Okay, we got that, FCC. Leave me alone. Now, when you're talking about the county and the municipalities, I think a lot of people don't realize, especially like if you're not from here or been here a super long time, you don't realize, you think of the municipalities as Mumford, Atoka, Brighton, Covington. And but yeah, well, I'm saying, like, if say you moved into the south end of the county, you may not even be aware of Mason. But you've got Mason. You have a ton of municipalities in Tipton County. I think it's 9. You've got Garland, you've got Burleson, you have Giltedge, you have Mason. I'm sure I'm leaving somebody out.
We got Drummonds.
Yeah, Drummonds.
Yeah, there's so many. Of course, we could break it down to as far as like going to Elmira and Idaville. There's a lot of communities.
Elmira,
Hopewell, and Symington.
I'm so glad you said Elmira. That's who I was trying to think of. The 3rd star was 4 and 3 star. That's from earlier. You weren't in here, but earlier I was trying to think of who the 3rd star for 3 star is, and I think Elmira is the one I forgot. So okay. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of small communities, that give Tipton County its fingerprint, and as time has gone on, some of the smaller communities lose some of the glamour they used to have. But I think that's what built Tipton County, and we can't forget about that. And I enjoy being in those communities with those folks, and being on the campaign trail has given me that opportunity. And so I've enjoyed that. Yep.
Well, man, look, I appreciate you joining me today. We talked off there. You said it's fine for you to come on in the future when you are Tipton County Executive and start doing these things. We can keep the people up to date and stuff. And so I appreciate that sort of open door policy with the public. And I look forward to it, man. I've known you for a long time. I always thought that I've always thought of you. Like I said, we never really hung out or anything. I just only knew you professionally, but I've always felt like you were a super smart guy, and just a really sort of down to earth guy who tries to think logically about everything and do the right thing. And that's not, even in public service, not always the case with people, but I've always admired you and the work you've done, even when you were a sheriff's deputy and when you're an investigator. We investigated a couple of cases together that had to do with arson, and so it was. I've always respected you, man. So I appreciate you coming in and giving us the time. Is there anything else you want to get out there before you go?
Oh, of course. I appreciate your vote, your support. August 6th election. You'll find me at the top of the ballot. Just appreciate it pushing that button. Need that support, even though I am unopposed. Look forward to serving.